that for me summed up the type of people I work with, where they will just keep going, keep trying to find that extra tiny sliver of performance or improvement, and until the program management team go, well, we have to stop and go to delivery mode now for development. Is what we've got here good enough? Good isn't really good enough. It needs to be exceptional for the type of product we deliver.
Sandy Holford, good morning. Welcome to the show. If you can start off by introducing yourself, please, and telling us what you do.
I'm Sandy Holford. I'm one of the chief engineers at McLaren Automotive. So my job is to work with all of the technical experts we've got and bring them together to deliver the best possible product that we can.
Cool. So, what does chief engineer mean? What does that mean in terms of the role?
So for me, I am the technical owner of a nominated vehicle. I work hand in hand with the program manager to deliver that vehicle. They look after the delivery, the financial side, the overall program delivery, and I look after the technical delivery. And what that means is I bring together lots of different technical experts who are each experts in their field and ensure we have the best possible mix of those different elements to provide the best overall product. So each of them will absolutely want everything focused on their deliverable, their element, their piece of the vehicle, because that's their expertise and that's their passion. My job is to make sure that the balance is right between all the different elements.
Cool. Okay. So look, we're going to spend some time talking about the car later on, and I've got a little video on. I want to show the video on the website as well because it's a really cool car. But obviously, so engineering. I want to start off by winding right back to not so much school, but A levels and university. So, what A levels did you do?
So I did design and technology, physics and maths, with a bit of language at AS, for being pushed to take a fourth
Okay.
AS level at school. I think for me, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that stage. I think certainly coming out of GCSEs, I was picking the subjects I hated the least. Is probably the
Okay.
fairest way
Okay.
I can sum up my decision making process. But it was things I felt a level of aptitude for or enjoyed, and I did maths. I picked maths mechanics. I'm a very visual person. I can imagine a block sliding down a slope for maths mechanics. I cannot visualize a sine wave graph. Probably now, a lot of practice, but not so much at school. It was, yeah, I picked the subjects that I felt the most affinity with, and also had an opportunity to be spoken to by various universities trying to push their recommendations at the time, and that helped form some of what I wanted to do.
If you did physics and maths, you're obviously a clever fella, right? So you have a whole world of opportunity in front of you, including things like pilots and stuff like that. Flying planes, join the IRF and stuff. So why did you choose engineering? Why was that a good thing for you?
So, in terms of the degree I did, a chap called Blue Ramsey came to visit my school from Brunel University,
Okay.
and when we were going through the whole UCAS process and looking at all the different courses and things available, and I did apply to various like, pure mechanical engineering other items, but the degree that he sold us the idea on was a kind of new type at the time. It was a degree set out to be a good jack of all trades as opposed to a master of one.
Okay.
And the idea was you would touch on that degree in a company that created things. I've always been very keen on creating things and be able to touch the product.
Yeah.
And the idea was you would be able to sit in a meeting room with any department in the company and understand what they were talking about. You may not be the expert in the room, but you'd have a grounding in it.
Okay.
So that went from everything from computer-aided design, fluid dynamics and mechanics, through to designing a circuit board, to coding the microchip in it, to designing the way you present the information in a sales pitch, like
Yeah.
a grounding in everything, and that interested me. Having all the snippets of lots of different things interested me much more than kind of really honing in and being specific in one thing. And I think that's probably really helped me.
Is that because you're wired a certain way? Do you think to be like that? Because not everybody is wired that way.
No, I think for me, the lots of different things definitely helps kind of focus the attention span, and I like to be involved in lots of different things, and I think that yeah, that suits me naturally. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what? Sorry, what was the degree you did?
So I did product design engineering.
Okay, and what was your final piece? Did you have to make something?
Yeah, so well, we had a couple of different things. My final year project was on behalf of the Home Office, looking at public water shields.
Okay,
I can't talk a huge amount more about, but we also did a mechatronics project, so a mechanical output from an electronic input. So I did a device which would seem very normal nowadays, where you could text home and various items in your house would turn on or off depending on what you text messaged your house. Which
okay.
nowadays in the world of Wi-Fi and home connection is really normal. But
The
wasn't
Internet of
something.
Things. So you invented the Internet of Things 15 years ago, Sandy. I'm impressed, mate.
Not quite enough for the university to go after the patent, but close.
Fair enough. So you mentioned Home Office there. So for those people watching or listening, they don't know that I've known you for over 10 years, so we've been friends for a long time. So I know where you went after university, but did you take the easy route and go work for the Home Office after university because you'd already worked there before?
No, so I did interview there, and there were some options around, but in the end, it wasn't quite what I was looking for in terms of what to do. So I took a I did all sorts immediately after university. It was a bit of a strange time for looking for jobs
Okay.
in 2009, and so I did lots of short-term things while trying to find the right thing. And I had somebody I'd known through university, through climbing, in fact, who was working at McLaren, and I I love driving cars and being part of that, but I've never been what I would consider myself to be a car nut.
Okay.
Lots of my colleagues are fantastic at
How
recalling
on earth has
all
that
all
happened
the
compared to what you're doing now, right?
well, I've got lots of colleagues who can recall every variant of Porsche that was ever made and describe the differences in
Okay.
detail. And the big car magazines and things wasn't necessarily me, but I like creating things. I like fixing things. I like problem solving, which I think is what most engineers come down to eventually. It's problem solving. It's just different people prefer solving different types of problems.
Okay.
Some people are very good at solving the problem that something doesn't exist and it should. Others are better at taking something that exists and trying to make it better.
Next question then. So tell me how on earth you got into McLaren. How did that job come about?
So when I was doing various things, having left university, I just kind of stopgap jobs. A friend of mine who I'd known through the climbing club at university was working at McLaren,
Okay.
and he said to me that I do know of a job going here. It's not necessarily what you want to do long term, but it's a way in the door and a chance to get to know some of the business. So I was interviewed with for a data control job, but it's one of the things starting in a company where there was maybe 100 people in the company at the time.
Okay.
Um,
Wow. Right.
your your job role can be fairly flexible, and you get involved with what needs to be done. So
Yeah.
I started in a component releasing role, i.e., doing the data behind it. However, the reason I was hired was because of some of my technical background. The person doing that wanted somebody who could spot errors in the technical release rather than just making the release, following the process. It was spotting the errors in the drawings or other items. So
Okay.
I did that for 6 months, and then took the opportunity to jump into the engineering community at
Okay. So,
McLaren.
but you've held various roles, right, until the chief engineer role you have now. So,
Yeah,
talk me through
absolutely.
that story.
So I started off in interior systems. So come on, across belief, not necessarily just the rag and fluff that the rest of the engineering team would.
Isn't that the one where I take the mick out of you because you went to Italy to smell leather for steering wheels or something? Is that right?
So not to smell, but we do. There are people whose whole job that is out there in the industry to ensure odors meet requirements. But
You've got to be kidding me.
well, you need to meet requirements for both customer satisfaction and also the legal requirement
Okay.
for various chemicals that sit in the production process. But
Yeah.
no, so I used to look after seats, steering wheels, airbags, basically things you can touch and feel inside the car, plus the
Okay.
technical behind it. And then gradually, in my career, with any kind of expanding company, there can be opportunities as the company expands and roles created, and certainly looking for those roles and seeing where they fit you and where you can learn something. by picking up the next role, and I've been very fortunate in some ways to be able to take opportunity from that
Yeah.
company expanding and then looking for somebody or saying, you know what, I reckon I could do that role as part of this role. I can put the two together and make it into a bigger role.
Okay.
And not being afraid to propose things. A lot of good fortune in that, in terms of the way the company was evolving and moving, but also some bosses at times who were very good at listening and taking on team thoughts on how we should work. So saying what
Okay.
we need to achieve, but then asking the team how they wanted to achieve it, and that's something I've tried to take into any of my leadership. It's there are some definite whats you have to achieve, but the how for me should come as part of a crowdsourcing ideas with the team, because if you are the person that knows the most in your team, then you've probably hired the wrong team.
Okay.
Because for me, certainly in the technical community, you want to hire experts in what they do. So
Yeah.
each person in that cross-functional team I'm working with should know more about their area than me, and how my skill is, or my job is to pull all those different pieces together.
Yeah. Well, the sign of a good leader or manager is someone who hires the best in the industry, and often people that are better than them themselves, because then they're going to get the job done to high quality. So I get that. So I'm going to try something which I've not done before. I'm going to try and share my screen. I'm going to try and share the little video of the car that you're responsible for. Now, I'm not sure this is going to work, right? But let's give it a go.
At McLaren, every innovation is a step forward. Every benchmark can be beaten. All it takes is passion, a belief in technology, the bravery to put it to the test. We never stop searching for the next breakthrough. Every gain is a win. Progress means more power, more purity, more elation. Then, a new benchmark emerges. The new McLaren 750S.
So, what's it like to drive a 750S, mate?
So as I said, I'm biased, but I think it's fantastic. I mean, for me, what we've really tried to do with the car is have a car that's fun to drive, but drive legally. You can have these cars that are incredible things and they look great on a video and with a journalist driving on a
Yeah.
closed F1 track, but actually to experience any of that kind of drama engagement with the car, you've got to be on the limit in a way that's just not possible to legally enjoy
Of course.
on a public road. So one of the things engineers worked really hard on was making that car engaging and fun and enjoyable to drive at all speeds.
Okay. So I looked up and I think Evo said the 750S that McLaren made is not only the best of its time, but possibly the best of all time. That's quite an accolade, right? So,
I'll take
how has that gone down in the industry in terms of the car? What does the industry think?
I think it's been a really interesting car to release because on the surface of it, it doesn't look hugely different to its predecessor
Yeah.
in terms of visual change, but the predecessor was designed and so aerodynamically led that we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. It
Yeah.
was so far ahead of its time in that sense that we just continued that process instead.
Are you a good driver?
Am I a good driver? Um, I can definitely drive. I think if you compare me to lots of others who are highly skilled drivers, absolutely not. I think there's a wide range of people in driving capability. We hire people who are really good at that for that reason, but we also assess cars for all types of drivers. So we don't know who's going to buy our car. It could be an ex-racing driver. It could be somebody who's stepping into the supercar market for the first time. So we need to design the cars to be suitable for use by everybody.
So I've got to ask you, and I know the answer to this question, but I think it's interesting. What car do you drive?
So at home, I drive a Volvo XC60. So for me, it's a family man. It's a family car, and I think my wife probably drives it more than I do. I ride bikes a lot.
Yeah.
Um, I cycle to work because it's a good way of getting some exercise in before I work each day, and I get my fun at work.
Yeah,
So
no, that's
I've
cool.
just about persuaded myself that anyway, that I don't have a fun car at home because I get my fun at work.
No, so that's how we met, right? It was cycling, because we're both early founders and members of working cycling clubs, so that's how we got to know each other. Um, I know, and having known you for a number of years, I know that you've had to make some personal sacrifices in terms of work-life balance, because I know you do some fair few hours. So how do you cope with that, and how have you managed to maintain a good work-life balance?
I think it fluctuates depending on where you are in your career and what you're doing. And I think a good question to ask yourself when you are struggling with that balance is, at this moment, the way I'm doing this, is this leading to something? I think
Okay.
if you're doing it for a decade and your balance isn't good and you're not getting what you want outside of that work time, the question is to ask yourself why, and whether it's correctly apportioned effort, if that makes sense. Um, for me, the kind of the work life balance has come in kind of waves, because there are definitely very intensive times, and I've learned a huge amount, and that's helped me get to what I'm doing. But it's understanding when an effort is a push effort and when it's a sustainable effort.
Yeah.
And finding sustainability is really important if you don't want to burn out.
So one of the challenges I know that you faced in the last year or so, because we know each other, is, and you've said this before, you don't like speaking about yourself. So thank you for doing the interview. How have you overcome? Probably fear is not the right word, but how have you overcome being front of camera for for the product, for the car launch and what have you? How did you get around that?
It was one of the targets I set myself for this year, was to push myself out of my comfort zone. There's definitely been some events and items that I could have turned down or said no to, or found a reason why I wasn't going to do, and somebody else from our more experienced marketing team maybe have taken it on. But the challenge I set to myself was, if I don't do these now, when will my next opportunity be to push myself out of that zone and to
Yeah.
really challenge myself to do it? And it's, I think, practice for me. Some of the things are just doing it over and over again. Certainly presenting, um, knowing your audience. Some of the tricks and tips I use when I'm presenting internally at the company is to, I sit there and I know what each person is going to ask, because you get to know the people in the peer group around you, and the
Okay.
questions
Yeah.
they're going to ask after. You learn to answer their question in the original presentation. When you come to a set of journalists, some of whom's job, quite rightly, is to try and catch you out in places and to ask the questions and get their unique soundbite that someone else isn't
Of
going to get,
course. Yeah.
is trying to predict the questions and think about them up front, and just work with that. But yeah, that was, yeah, it's been a very different year, doing a lot of things outside of that. But it's, yeah, it's been rewarding as well, kind of pushing myself to do so. And if you don't push yourself to do the uncomfortable things, then you don't take that next step, and you don't learn from it.
So what's next for Sandy? What's next on the horizon for you?
So for me at the moment, it's finishing up the current vehicle,
Yeah.
and then time will tell. And if I knew exactly what I was doing next, I wouldn't be able to tell you about it.
That's fine. Even if there were new cars, I knew you wouldn't tell me anyway because you never told me anything. So that's fine. Cool. All right. Outside of work, when I was researching your LinkedIn, it said you were a STEM ambassador. I never knew that. What's that all about?
So science, technology, engineering, math. So I do at McLaren. I'm very supportive of that. So we have an allowance of time we can spend, and it varies depending on what people are after, but often that's around going into schools and talking to various age groups, depending on what age they are, about what engineering is and what science is, and how that can be useful in everyday life, but also making sure they understand what it is, and depending on the age, what opportunities exist out there. So I often do something we call how to build a supercar, and it's talking through some of the younger schools, and it's talking through the different stages of what we do and the stages they may not realize exist in that process, and how many different jobs there are in that space, and how it takes all kinds of different jobs and people in order to deliver a final product. There isn't somebody sitting there and doing it by themselves.
So you must have a big turnout for your presentations then, because one, McLaren, and two, you're talking about building a supercar. So you must have very open ears and attentive children, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually it's the level of excitement because we often go in a pair because it's quite useful when you go out, and it also shows different people. So we try and show a diversity of different engineers as well.
Yeah.
But if we walk up to a school and we're going to present to 200 pupils, maybe do 2 or 3 presentations on the trot that we've arrived in a car, they've all heard and seen that, so their enthusiasm and
You
excitement
actually
is
turn up in a McLaren. Now that is pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
yes. I mean, don't get me wrong, A, a mode of transport, but B, I think it helps people to see something and get them excited when they see something they might have only seen in a magazine or on television or on YouTube before. So it helps get some focus.
It's the sound of the McLarens I love. It's just incredible. Okay, other stuff. Right, so what are you not so good at? Must be something you're rubbish at.
What am I not so good at? I think things you're not good at, you tend to find coping mechanisms for, right? Because you have to do that. So
Yeah.
for me, I'm quite an organised person because I'm a disorganised person, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I have lots of systems for organising myself and what I need to do in what priority order because, as I said before, I like doing lots of different things and I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
So making sure I get the right things done in the right place, it's finding a coping mechanism for that and finding the way that makes you tick. So for me, it's post-it notes.
Okay.
I little tasks, each one broken down to post-it note, and the more annoying the place of the post-it note, the more important the task is. If it's on my mouse, it's the one I'm going to have to do next time I touch the computer because the post-it note's going to drive me nuts on the mouse. So
Okay. No, I like that. I like that.
method.
I have a whiteboard next to me, but I also use the I can't remember. It was an American president used the important and urgent matrix. So if it's important and urgent, it's the first thing you do. If it's not important and urgent, you'll probably never get around to it. And I tend to use that in most of my life.
There is a good little matrix like that, which is but you ask yourself whether it needs to be done, whether it needs to be done by you.
Okay.
So there's a phrase that came out of some training I did a few years ago, which is part of kind of a manager and leader training. It was around the phrase was do only what only you can do, which I always thought sounded a bit supercilious. So the
Okay.
way I turn that phrase around is appropriate person, appropriate task. Because that's an interesting finding a balance because I won't ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. That's one of my kind of rules is I don't ask someone to do a miserable task that I wouldn't do. Don't get me wrong, I might not enjoy the task, but it's something that I've either done or I would do.
Yeah.
But in doing that, you can often start doing things and you go, actually, if I'm doing this task, am I the right person for it? Could someone do it better? But also, I'm capable and they're capable, but are they capable of doing the thing I'm not doing because I'm doing this task? So in terms of a team and strategy, if you're doing a do task, are you taking away from what you should be doing in strategic leadership or thinking about the future and planning ahead because you're doing the now task? So sometimes it is right to do the now task to support a team if we're time constrained, but also it's really easy to get hands on. I love being hands on with things. So sometimes I have to remind myself that I should not be doing that and letting the team do because they can't do the next thing.
So
It's all
easy.
appropriate person, appropriate task.
Love it. So easy. Next question. What sort of manager are you?
So in terms of, at the moment, I have the great position of being not a direct line manager of anybody.
Okay.
I'm essentially a consultant, but I guess the way I describe myself is that it's kind of a mixture between democratic and coaching. Because I said up before, work with experts, they know their field the best, so they know what they want to achieve in that. However, I need to find the best way of everyone working and delivering the final product. So it's taking the inputs from everybody and then working out what the best balance is, but also trying to bring along the coaching side and bring people along to the point where they're promoting conversation so they come to the conclusion themselves where possible, having worked through the different options and items as opposed to telling.
Okay. So what would the people who have worked for you in the past have had direct reporting to you? How would they describe your leadership style?
Crikey, that's definitely a question you'd have to ask them.
That's not an easy question, Sandy. I'm sorry.
No, I'm trying to think how they describe it as. As I said before, I hate talking about me. So I think they'd probably say I was all about building the team and bringing the team together because that's always been really important to me. I want people to want to work as opposed to they have to. It's where possible trying to respect everyone's opinion and what they do. And I think they'd say I sought input. I hope they'd say I sought input.
Yeah.
And that I cared about the individual.
Okay, cool. Tough question that, by the way, so well done on answering that. Are there, and this is one of my favourite questions, it's not a difficult one, is were there any defining moments in your career or life, like a sliding door moment, which significantly affected your path? That could be you turned down a job, or you accepted a job, or a role, or whatever like that. Any of those defining moments in your life?
I think in terms of
it could be, by the way, at school. It could be that you chose to do a certain A level. It could be that you chose, you were influenced by that guy Blue or whatever his name was from Brunel University. It could be anything like that.
That was certainly. I'm trying to think of side doors. That was certainly an influence. I think I was very different between school and university. I think I had a point where as most people do when they're young, tried to fit in and tried to be what everyone else was trying to be. And I think I had an epiphany when I kind of went into the much bigger world that is university and higher education, where there's just so many more people. And I kind of went, well, I'm going to be me. And if people don't like it, then that's their problem. I'll find some people that kind of appreciate me for me. And I think that they probably labelled me to be much more who I wanted to be. I think in terms of career and where I got to is I often found opportunities can be a bit like buses. They don't come along and you get a lot at once. And I had an opportunity 6-7 years ago at McLaren. I actually had 2 or 3 different roles that people were talking to me about at the same time. And I spent a lot of time sitting at home on the kitchen table, sketching out what each one would teach me. So I've got a bit of a rule about roles is the role you're in's got to have at least one, if not more, of 4 things. It's either got to be something you really enjoy doing. It's got to be paying you what you want so you can do what you want to do outside of work. It's got to be teaching you something that gets you to the role you'd like to be in, or it's got to be something that gives you the life balance you need because you could have other requirements at home, children, elderly parents, whatever else. And if you have none of those 4, I'd always encourage someone to challenge themselves or whether they're in the right role right now. So I kind of applied those 4 and looked at it, and actually it was about, they were all going to teach me something. But it was, where did I want to be? And if I think of the building blocks of skills required for that job, let's say I needed 10 skills for that job, which of these jobs I was looking at was going to give me most of those blocks, or the blocks that were the hardest to get experience in. So I had a couple of different options, and the one I picked was the one that got me towards full car, away from being a specialist in a certain area.
Okay.
Potentially wasn't as senior a role as one of the other ones, but it was a type of breadth that we didn't have many roles that gave you that breadth. So that's really, if I hadn't made that decision, I don't know if I'd be in the role I'm in today, because it enabled me to go to an area of the business which isn't necessarily a popular area to work in terms of what we call serial production, cars that already exist. A lot of engineers really like working on blank sheets of paper. For me, I have an affinity with trying to make things that exist better anyway. I think that's probably a thing that comes more naturally to me than blank sheet of paper. But it enabled me to really make that my own, and that ended up being a role that I was able to sketch out what the role was and what the boundaries of it were. So it enabled me to sketch that out in a way that I would take on tasks and ownership where I'd really learn from it.
Cool. That's a great answer, Sandy. I think I thought we were going to go a little bit psychological early on because you said you wanted to be the person you wanted to be. But in terms of the career stuff, when you talk about your career or your aspirations, I'm getting the feeling it's more about personal and professional development than the role, if that makes sense. Would that be correct?
I got given some really good advice when I was probably in my first or second role at McLaren. When someone had asked me about what I wanted to do later in my career, I'd always struggled to answer that question. And I was talking about roles. And the manager I had at the time said to me, no, don't talk about titles. Titles will come and go and they'll change. What do you want to do in the role? And I've always kept a bit of advice and passed it on again to people. It's thinking about the types of activity you'd like to do in your day-to-day, not what the title is. Sometimes the title really helps if you're looking for a specific thing or progression, but there's no point having a title if what you're doing in the day doesn't excite you and with passion. Certainly for me to really drive and achieve things, I need to be passionate about them. So I've always looked for the things that I enjoy doing, and that I can then have that process and try and take something that is either a thing you know how to do or a subject matter you know about. And for sustainable growth, picking one of those, so you can go and do a job you know how to do in a new subject matter area because you can draw on the knowledge of how to do it and learn the subject matter, or picking a subject matter you know a lot about and doing a slightly different role in that in terms of trying to sustainable growth. You can jump off a diving board and do both at the same time, but then that comes back to that question we talked about earlier of work-life balance, of have you got time in where you're at right now to do the extra on top to help yourself feel confident and to build that the rate you need to build it at to perform.
Yeah, it's really interesting because on this last series, I've interviewed quite a few CEOs and heads of sales and stuff like that, and this conversation is so different from a sales-focused CEO who's been, a competitive sportsman, which I know you have anyway. But it's just engineering and non-engineering has been very, very different, which is pretty cool. Okay, what advice would you give someone who wants to go into engineering and perhaps even particularly vehicle manufacturing and design?
What advice? I think if someone was starting out right now and thinking about it, it's looking for where you think it's going to go. I think there's engineering, there'll always be core engineering in terms of practical problem solving and mechanical engineering, but in the world right now, there's definitely a shift. If you see in terms of the amount of integration of digital items that there are, so there's an awful lot of digital engineering, software, connectivity that was never there before, and certainly deciding which bit of that both interests you, but also where do you think the industry is going to go? Because if you do I don't think it's necessarily quite that point yet, but if you do a degree for 3 or 4 years and do your A levels and you get to a point where you go, oh, does that role exist still now? Because you're focusing on a role, not a thing.
Yeah.
Should I have been more engaged in electronics? Should I be more engaged in combustion? It's that looking forward to do that. But I think the best advice I can give is to things that motivate you and things that you find interesting, because you will always learn more and be inquisitive about things you find interesting. And it's finding the elements of that you do find interesting and weaving those into the elements you find less interesting to keep the whole thing going. But there's experience is really good, and lots of companies do offer opportunities to do work experience or placements. I would really recommend a placement year at university for anybody.
Okay.
I think for me, it helped me focus in my final year. It made me completely change the way I worked in that, because I'd gone and I'd done a job and I'd made a difference to someone outside of myself and my learning.
Okay.
Therefore, I found it much easier, and I treated my final year at university like a working day. I just did a long working day, and I don't think I worked an evening or a weekend, because I wanted to treat it like work and then go back to work, because I enjoyed working and delivering something as part of a bigger team so much more.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. What do you think about the impact of technology and AI? Is that going to change engineering and perhaps even particularly your area of expertise, do you think?
It's not something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I think some of the things that exist and the way data is captured now is something that needs to be looked at. A lot of it's out there, and I think the amount of AI generation of things, some of them are clearly AI doesn't really understand what that is in any way, shape, or form, and some of them are concerningly accurate in terms of fakes and bits and pieces. So I think it's a tap that's difficult to turn off. I think it'll be interesting to see how people both use it and regulate it.
So I use AI not every day, but mostly for if I write a report or a proposal and I don't like the way it sounds, I'll just go to ChatGPT and say, please reword this, make it more formal, less formal, and it works quite well. However, I do see quite a few emails that come through which are clearly AI generated, and you can tell. Do you think engineering is going to change because of technology? Because there'll be less hands-on stuff, and there'll be a lot of automation in terms of design, and we're not going to do it that way because computer says that. Do you think it'll change things?
I think things will evolve. If you think back 50 years, the way to see if something worked was to make it and to see if it worked. That's both slow and expensive.
Yeah.
I think certainly in technology where you want to deliver something to market quickly, the idea is to, I say when I talked about STEM earlier, when I talked to the kids, so mistakes are okay. Because if you never make a mistake, then you probably haven't pushed yourself as hard as you could have done. And especially when trying to deliver a technology, if you deliver something that's safe and everything works right first time, you've either got the most incredible design process of anyone on the planet, or the envelope didn't get pushed far enough. So technology certainly now allows you to simulate things and run tests of items quickly in a digital world where you haven't had to pay or wait for tooling and manufacture of components. And it essentially allows you to fail fast, iterate, and test again. So you have all sorts of guidelines and design guides and processes for trying to deliver a right first time design. However, when you get to a validation stage, if you can do any of that in a simulation to help guide that initial design, then you can make greater iterations and steps much faster. And I think that's where some of the technology will be really interesting. I think technology will have to support what we do because people expect it to be integrated. If you think now what's integrated into a phone or a car versus what it was 20 years ago, maybe even 10, 15 years ago, I mean, my phone is far more powerful than probably my first computer at work was, by a long shot.
Yeah.
And it's an exponential.
You should have seen the first computer I had on my desk, Sandy. In fact, I've talked about this with the last guy I interviewed because we both worked in technology in the early days, and we both witnessed the first IBM PC AT, I think it was, which was crazy. Let me just see if I missed any questions. Blah blah blah. I've talked about that. I think we're pretty much done, actually, mate. Is there any questions you'd like me to ask you that I haven't asked?
To ask me?
I know you don't like talking about yourself, but there may be something you want me to ask.
I suppose I was wanting to think about all the weird and wonderful questions you posted me on the things I might
mate,
answer.
if you I can if you want me to. I can ask you some sort of odd stuff, but there were some.
No, not.
Oh, were you looking at the old list of questions?
Yeah, you gave me a list. I went, holy potato, some of those.
No. I seem to move away from that nowadays. Okay. One question I do like asking, right, is can anyone be a leader? Everyone does that when asking that question. They take 10 seconds to think about it and contemplate their answer before they do it.
I think it's less about whether anyone can do it. It's about whether it comes naturally to people. I think anyone can manage a team because you can do it, but whether it requires a intense amount of effort and a lot of strategies to do it because it's something that comes naturally to you. I think one of the things that happens in lots of companies is the only way to progress is to become a manager, and that doesn't suit everybody. Some people, their route of progression needs to be in technical expertise because that's both what they're very, very good at and what they really enjoy. Something we're starting to realize is there's almost two paths of progression. There is technical subject matter expertise, and there is people who find leadership something that comes naturally to them. So, can anyone be a leader? Clearly, if you look out there in the days and you look at, I'm not going to go into politics, but you look at some of the people that are in positions of power, clearly anybody can become one. Whether or not they excel at it, I think is probably a different question.
Okay, cool. I've got this last couple of bizarre questions while we finish up then. So, I give you £1 million to build something, develop something, invent something. What would you do with it? Or what would you create? Because you're an engineer, right? Normally, if I asked someone else that question, they'd go and, I don't know, buy a boat and a house or something. But if, as an engineer, I would expect you to build something.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, though, isn't it? As an engineer, there are hundreds of ideas in my head, and I'd have to go to a process to feel which one of them was most deserving of that opportunity.
All right. Let me spin that, right. I give you £10 million seed funding for Sandy Holford PLC or Limited. It would be. What would that company look like that you would lead? What would you do? What would you build?
I think we talked about, as a person, if I focus just on the me element of that, is I like doing different things. So I think the idea of being a expertise design consultancy where you go in and develop things for people and solve their problems. For me, what it comes down to is I'm a problem solver. I enjoy taking something that exists and either iterating its performance, making it better, or fixing something that doesn't work on it, more than I enjoy that blank sheet of paper. So I think for me, if I was to do that, it would be an engineering consultancy and ability to go in and hire the right experts. That means we can drop in and support people who need that.
Okay. All right. Let me just check. There's no other silly questions I can ask you. I'm sure there must be, but no, I think we're done, mate. I think we've done. So look, Sandy, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I do appreciate you doing the interview for me. I know we've known each other for a long time, but I do appreciate the time. Is there any final words or comment you want to make in terms of, I don't know, a phrase you live by or a final piece of advice you give anyone?
I think I try and live, and the things that I think about are things that people have said to me more than I go by, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I'm always motivated by people. And one of my dynamics engineers who worked on the last car said to me, the last thing is, you're going to have to tell me when to stop. You're going to have to tell me when to put my pencils down, because I'm going to keep going and trying to make it better till you tell me I'm not allowed to anymore because we have to deliver it. And that for me summed up the type of people I work with, where they will just keep going, keep trying to find that extra tiny sliver of performance or improvement, and until the program management team go, well, we have to stop and go to delivery mode now.
Okay.
And I try and use that as motivation for myself. And that kind of person go, actually, could we go a bit further? Is what we've got here good enough? Good isn't really good enough. It needs to be exceptional for the type of product we deliver and the type of expectation of our customers. Good isn't good enough. So that for me, that's quite a motivational thought in terms of how the team think.
I've really enjoyed this, Andy. You should be very proud of the 750S. Great car, looks fantastic, sounds fantastic, and I wish you every success in your future career at McLaren.
Thank you very much.